As always, this meeting is being recorded and is being broadcast or may be rebroadcast on WestfordCAT. We'll start the meeting as normal with open forum. Anybody from the board have anything for open forum?
No.
Are we going to do anything with town meeting? The only thing I want to say is there's been a lot of negative comments online. I think I'd really want to compliment the town clerk, the town manager's office, and the election officials, because that was the most efficient entry I've ever seen in terms of, you know, just shy of 1,600 people that they processed in a very short amount of time. You could see the difference that the new systems made from the fall. And I just think that should be on the record that, you know, there was no way to predict they were going to get 1,600. It's an unfortunate circumstance, but compliments to everybody who worked that and did a really good job that morning.
Agreed. Joe, anything?
Well, speaking of town meeting, because there were so many people, it has been rescheduled currently for April 27th at 9 a.m. With a rain date of April 28th over at Westford Academy. Then the other thing I would just announce, Mr. Chair, is right now we don't have anything scheduled for your typical meeting date of April 16th. So if you were to continue anything tonight, it might make sense to continue it to May 6th, and that would give us an opportunity to use that date as a, say, open house, if you will, for anybody who's still interested in getting more info on MBTA communities, since town meeting got postponed to after that date. So we would just ask that you do that for us.
Gotcha. Jeff?
Nothing, Mr. Chair.
Anybody from the audience?
Diane Wood, 122 Depot. I want to start a discussion about remote access. As you probably know, there's a lot of discussion going on now as a result of town meeting, remote participation, etc. Some of the discussions are specific as it relates to town meeting. What I'd like to ask is to take that discussion and bring it to the planning board and ask why the planning board does not have virtual Zoom, Microsoft Teams meeting as a number of other towns do. Concord, Acton, Cohasset, Marlborough, Swampscott, I could go on and on. With just a quick look online, I found 15 towns that conduct their meetings this way. And I don't understand, for the transparency of the planning board, for being inclusive, why don't we have remote meetings for planning board? So I'd like to hear what people have to say.
Well, I can tell you that, unlike other committees and boards in this town, the public hearing process for planning board is a little bit more stringent. There are so many things that could go wrong with a hybrid meeting, and this town does not have a policy or procedures in place to hold that. So at this point, I'm certainly not for holding any type of hybrid meetings. If the select board comes up with a procedure and a plan and staff that can handle the issues that may arise, I mean, we can't have our staff running Zoom meetings with the limited resources that we have. So I don't think we're at a point, in my opinion, as chair, I'm not speaking for the board, it's my opinion, that we should be able to hold the hybrid meetings until such time as that procedure is in place.
So this has come up time and time again, and it's the same answer.
Well,
there's
been no procedure, there's been no direction by the select board for us to hold.
Have we asked, has the planning board asked for a procedure to be put into place? Because it just seems, I asked this question last 6 months.
And I don't feel as strongly about this as you do, right? I don't think it's necessary, so I haven't asked, right? I think the public meeting as we hold it is effective and appropriate. So I haven't asked for any type of procedure from the select board, but if they come up with a procedure and we feel it's foolproof and there's not going to be somebody who says, well, I tried to participate and I couldn't participate, therefore your public hearing's invalid, it drags things out and can cause havoc. Until that time, we have assurances that I'm not for a hybrid or
I hear that. I'd be curious to know what your other board members think, but in addition to that, there are umpty-nine other towns that successfully do this. This isn't rocket science. That's if we said there's only one other community that does this, I can understand, but there isn't. As I said, I counted at least 10 or 12 without a deep search. I even called Acton and spoke to Acton town and said, what issues do you go into? She said, what do you mean? And I said, have you run into conflict? Have you run into legal issues? No, I can't say that. So I'm baffled as to why we wouldn't at least start to ask to put a plan in place. If you don't want to do it immediately, I can understand that. but at least let's make some progress. And it seems as though there isn't any progress. It's just flat no. And I'm just trying to understand, why wouldn't you be all in favor of educating the community, being inclusive, and being transparent? And that's not happening.
I take some, we are inclusive and we are transparent. And certainly all of us are available to speak with at any time. Anybody else want to chime in on this?
The only question I'd have is, if all these other towns are doing it, what are the procedures they're following? I got you, and I hear you, and it is a select board initiated process, I think, for the town. I don't think we should be taking this on ourselves. There's the funding issue, first off, of the tools and the administrative staff. And secondly, there is the procedure. Select board does run some hearings, so they would run into some of the same issues there, so.
Are they still virtual, or are they back to having their meetings in person now?
Hybrid, generally hybrid.
So the select board runs a hybrid meeting. My only comment, Ms. Wood, was gonna be, when we ran virtual meetings during the pandemic, I know towards the end of that time, we heard a lot of negative feedback from the community saying they didn't like the virtual meetings and that there were technology challenges and issues that people were having. Some folks had microphone issues, they couldn't say their comments. So I guess my only perspective is, it seems like maybe a hybrid meeting would produce more visibility. I don't know that it would alleviate all of the technical challenges we heard about coming from folks during the pandemic when we were actually 100% virtual. There were a number of those. I don't know if everybody here was here during that time period, but it seemed like, especially as time moved on and when we had a heavy topic with a lot of people commenting on it, we just kept hearing time and again that people couldn't get their questions in, they didn't know how to use the chat features, things like that of the online platforms.
That's where I think the hybrid could address those people. I mean, the people that can't do that could attend in person with a hybrid.
Yes.
But
I don't know that everybody who's remote, unless
I'm
we
not
had
sure
a very-
everybody who has the issue now about feeling they can't get here
Right,
can necessarily also address the technology challenges. That's the key.
correct.
John Dyer, Torrington Lane. Just seems like, I get it, I get why you want these, especially for the hot topic things, but the planning board seems to be more of like individual item things, not overall changes to the town as much. So I don't think we should be spending more money on technology to, especially with the situation we're in, just to.
All right. Anything else on this before we move on?
No.
No, I would just add that during the pandemic, it was fully remote, so it wasn't hybrid.
Right.
So a hybrid model would be new, something we'd have to look,
Yeah.
there'll be a lot to look at, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, we haven't tried a hybrid as far as I know.
Right.
Yes.
Kathy Ricketson, 5 Westford Hills Road. Isn't that the technology? Is that?
That's a microphone.
That's
That's
the,
ju-
not the
that's-
owl?
That's
Okay.
just the speakerphone mic.
Okay. And does Jeff know whether the town has any plans to improve on this technology?
So I can't speak for the town. The OWL obviously does allow for the hybrid or the Zoom. Things are possible. As they said, there are issues. And depending on the meeting, and one question is it going to be a town-wide policy for all boards and committees? That's, would come from, I would think, the select board. Is it going to be singling out particular boards or committees? Who decides that? I do think that if this board chose to explore that, I would personally feel more comfortable if we had set policies in place for what happens when certain things do go wrong. So there's clarity about if there's
Like
a
if there's
disconnect or an issue,
chat or-
here's what happens, or another way to maybe communicate. Absent that, I do have fear about protecting our public hearing process.
Okay, because I just want to say that, in terms of hot topics, like you mentioned, we have a lot coming in the town with the overlay, multifamily overlay housing and stuff, and I think there's going to be a lot of public interest in all of that over the next few years. And I think that for the other towns, as Diane was saying, their technology keeps improving. So I really think if you wanted to take a look at it, it's worthwhile to do. Okay, thank you.
Just before we move on
Please.
to the next topic, does the select board, when they're in hybrid mode, that's just for participants, or the board themselves can also be mixed, some in and some remote?
They can do either.
does that address the quorum issue we have, where only one person can be remote from the board in any given meeting?
I think we are supposed to, unless fully virtual, I think we typically try to have at least a quorum physically present.
But I guess my question is, does that change if there is a definition of a hybrid meeting and cameras are available, et cetera?
So I think that would be for the select board to change their remote or hybrid policy. But there are other things in play, maybe at the state level, that hasn't come to bear locally yet.
Got it.
And it may be up to the select board what they want to pursue or support, or whether things are mandatory or optional. And I could be wrong on that, but at this point in time, I think we would need some guidance from select board, and if they're going to amend their policy.
Thank you.
And my question to Ms. Wood would be, for these other towns that we've identified, can we find out some of their policies? If they've addressed these problems, I'd like to see how they've done it. If they're just operating in the blind, that's another matter.
Okay, so let's move on to our first public hearing, PB 2409, 426 Littleton Road. The applicant has requested continuance of this matter without further discussion to May 6th. Can I get a motion?
So moved that we postpone the hearing until May 6th at 7 PM for PB 2409.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Moving right along to PB 2404, the firearms bylaw. This is the first public hearing on a zoning bylaw amendment. We have a motion to waive the,
I'll move that we waive the reading of the public hearing notice for PB 2404.
Second.
motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Move that we open PB 2404 for public hearing.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Terrific.
Mr. Chair, thank you. So at the direction from the planning board after the last town meeting, the proposal before you tonight is to define and regulate firearm businesses and is to address some specific concerns raised by the police department. So this proposal, it would include the sale of firearms and ammunition and gunsmithing. It would not include firing ranges as part of the definition of a firearm business. It would still require a special permit process. It would limit special permits to be granted for firearm businesses in the commercial highway and the industrial highway zoning districts. It would include 2 buffers. Specifically, there would be a 500-foot separation distance between firearm businesses, and there would be a 1,000-foot buffer to schools, which in this case, from a practical standpoint, would mean Neshoba Valley Technical High School. Under this proposal, there would be no limitation on the number of special permits that could be issued for firearm businesses. And in this proposal, there are no other buffers proposed, such as to childcare centers, religious uses, or locations where children commonly congregate. And the planning board would still be the special permit granting authority under this proposal. So that's sort of the high-level version. We do have, for those of you who are here, we do have a couple of maps that show the areas in green where that would mean, showing the 1 buffer to Neshoba Valley Technical High School. And if you didn't get a chance to read it online, we do have a couple hard copy versions of the draft bylaw language at the table here. And Joe's got that map on the screen. It's generally located along Littleton Road, some parts of Powers Road, and you can see Neshoba Valley Technical High School there is the 1 buffer that comes into play for schools.
All right, great. So we, as a board, reviewed these draft language. Does anybody have any comments on it before we go to the public hearing? Anything else they want to talk about before? Bob?
No.
Joan?
I just have one question. At the last time we reviewed it, we had asked to, I know that childcare centers and preschools and schools, there are different permit processes or different regulations. Did we ever get an answer on how many of the daycare centers are licensed as preschools?
So we did look a bit into that. Of the 18 daycare facilities, 9 are preschools as well. So they have licenses as preschools.
As preschools, so should, where we have a definition of schools being, elementary, middle school, and high school, should preschool also be there? Would be my question.
So just for the direction given from the board the last time, we only included the schools that are listed here. I thought the message, and we may have misunderstood, but I thought the message we took was stick to just the schools that were listed, and I thought the intent was to avoid things like the child care or the preschool, and if we're mistaken, we'd like to know that.
I mean, that's how I understood how we left it, you know.
Okay.
Well, that conversation also included the college thing, because there was college language, I think, in the.
Junior
We removed
college.
The
that
junior
as well.
colleges, and yeah, exactly.
And we removed that errant reference to firing ranges as well.
Okay.
Dylan?
No, I'm good as it is written.
Darren?
No comments.
We'll open it up to the public. We'd like to take your comment and thoughts on our new proposed bylaw amendment.
Good evening, Rich Moran, 2 Royce Lane. I thought today was April Fool's Day, but it seems more like Groundhog Day. Here we go again with the firearm regulation. I got a bunch of comments and a bunch of questions. Jeff, you said the planning board brought this back. Who specifically brought this back on the table?
So after the last town meeting, the planning board had a discussion item about what, if anything, to do after that failed amendment attempt, and they decided to bring forward this so-called bare bones proposal.
Okay.
That was an open meeting.
So, as you said, we've already addressed this. It was resoundingly defeated. Do we have numbers on how much we spent on the last effort, including council, special meeting costs, town employees, police overtime, all the associated costs?
Well, I would suggest to you that this was not resoundingly defeated. This is a significantly different amendment than what was brought before town meeting.
We'll get to that, but it's not. That's my next question. Why aren't you honoring the window for similar proposals? Why aren't you honoring the 2-year window to not bring back a similar proposal?
It's our purview to be able to bring back. Planning board has the authority to bring something back before the 2 years.
Only the planning board.
Only if it's not
No,
similar.
no. It's,
That's not, Jeff, would you like to clarify that? Because that's not the way it was advertised the first go-around.
So there are a couple of things in play here, in my opinion. So first, under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 48, Section 5, you cannot bring back the same zoning bylaw amendment sooner than 2 years unless the second time around there is favorable recommendation by the planning board. Secondly, there's a separate question: what constitutes a substantially different proposal? And so that's not for any one person to decide, but I do think there are some significant differences between the first version and this version. It has changed what is included in the definition of firearm business. Though the district area is the same, they've removed a significant number of the buffers that were in play. There's a single buffer now, and there's no limitation on the number of special permits that can be issued for firearm businesses. So no matter where you stand on the issue, I think there are substantial differences between the first proposal and the second, but nonetheless, the planning board has always legally had the ability to bring forward a zoning bylaw amendment sooner than 2 years.
We could agree to disagree, because I think I was involved through the whole process, and the basis of that first proposal is still the same. So the add-ons that were added through the process, which we had advised it will never get through, and it didn't get through, and it won't the second time either. I'd like to know if we have estimates of how this is going to be funded, being that the town's underwater. And this apparently is going to be another special meeting?
Hasn't been decided. That's for the select board to decide.
Okay, so if it is a special meeting, once again, council has built-in costs, special meeting, we're probably going to need another 1,400 clickers, because there's going to be over 3,000 people if this comes up again. We're paying town workers, we're paying the police, and more important, we're opening it up to litigation. You may not feel that way. I guarantee there's going to be litigation on this. Question for you would be, how many permits have been applied for since the bylaw was overwhelmingly defeated, which it was?
You keep on saying overwhelmingly and resoundingly, and I think it did not get a two-thirds majority. It did have a majority to pass.
Correct, it wasn't close to
So I
two-thirds.
wouldn't call that what you would say is overwhelmingly or resoundingly defeated.
That's my opinion. So how many permits have been applied for?
We've received 0 applications for firearm businesses since that time.
So, I feel there's a perfect example of not listening to the town taxpayers. This is overregulation of a non-issue. We're wasting money on an issue that was already decided at great expense and seeded a boatload of division in the community. That was the largest town meeting in history at the time and has woken the sleeping bear. You're putting the town in a situation where it will be pulled into litigation. Is there any, if this goes to town meeting, it's open to amendments, correct?
Always is, yep.
So those amendments could make it almost identical to what was proposed last time.
If it's voted upon.
There are some limits on that, sir.
This is a very important, this is actually a very important question.
It
he's
is,
asking.
but there's that guidance we always get, now unfortunately, we don't see the moderator, about amendments have to stay within the footprint of what was posted on the warrant. And so there are limits to what you can add through amendments. It's easy to take stuff out, but you gotta stay within the the footprint.
Well, that's exactly the point, Bob.
Yeah.
When this body entertained reopening this and bringing this back to town meeting, I know, and I can go back and look on the record and figure out when that was, it was discussed whether or not this article would be able to be amended to go back in the direction of having restrictions on the number of special permits, et cetera, that was, and I agree that the last the last article that this body put forward and endorsed was an overly loaded article, and I disagree ultimately with, I agree with town meeting's decision to overrule that and not accept that. I thought, Jeff, that if we bring this back before town meeting, it could not go in that direction. It could only be reduced in scope, not expanded in scope. Can you please clarify whether that's the understanding or not?
I'll do my best. So, and I'm not town council, and I'm not the attorney general, and I'm not even an attorney. But if there are amendments at town floor, planning board would be asked to take a position on those amendments. If planning board does not recommend those amendments, essentially what is before town meeting is a bylaw amendment without the recommendation of town, without this planning board. And if you have something that's deemed to be substantially similar, without planning board recommendation, no matter what town meeting does, I believe that is quite subject to legal issues.
And I would expect the moderator and town council at that time to also weigh in.
So this body would have to take a position on
A favorable position,
a favorable position to allow any amendments to this article.
so long as they were substantially
Well,
similar.
I can't say that. I'm saying you are asked to always provide a recommendation on any amendment before it goes to town meeting. This is a question for councils. Where is the line? What is, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't have that answer for you.
Understood.
And that is a guarantee. There will be amendments. We know that. It's the way this thing has evolved over the last year or so. It's a guarantee.
Yep.
So, those are my points. I think we have more pressing needs in this town, and it's not something we should be wasting money on. Town has spoken on it and should be listened to. Thank you.
Hello. I'd just like to ask, oh, can you speak up?
Yeah,
Sorry.
those
Okay.
aren't amplifying. they're
Oh,
just
okay,
recording.
sorry. I would just like to ask the chief if he is supporting this bylaw. I'm speaking loudly.
And name and address for the record.
Okay, Kathy Ricketson, 5 Westford Hills Road. I would like to ask the chief if he's supporting this bylaw, and why, because it looks very much like his original proposal to me. Thank you.
I do support this bylaw. It does contain the basis for the concern why I asked or brought this forward originally a year and a half ago. My main concern was to create a buffer between firearms businesses to hamper some of the backdoor dealings that have been happening over in Littleton, and as well as the special permit. So we could have at least some say for some of the security measures, both the quality, quantity, and et cetera of the security measures that any firearms business is going to incorporate into their plan. To be involved in the process, the only way we can do that is through special permit, and to have that 500-foot buffer between firearms businesses is through special permit. It did creep in scope the last time, but I am in support of this bylaw wholeheartedly. I think it's an important measure for us to take to protect ourselves from some of the business that's being conducted in a neighboring community.
Mike?
Yes.
Can I ask one question of the chief to get it on the record? I think we talked about this back in December when we followed up to town meeting. But at town meeting, sir, there were some folks on the floor claiming that you had some of these authorities and you didn't need this bylaw. And I believe you disagreed with that. Could you kind of revisit that for us so we can get that on the record?
I do. So essentially what, if I can summarize what the argument was, is that under Section 122 and Section 123 of Chapter 140, the firearms law within the community, within the Commonwealth, the assertion was that the chief could essentially treat it as a special permit by denying any firearms business from coming in based on certain whatever criteria they thought I could apply. We've had multiple discussions with some firearms experts. I believe that in one of the public hearings, Al Prescott even mentioned that, you know, a law enforcement officer he spoke to said that I had that authority. I've denied it several times. I do not have that authority. I do not have that legal right. I cannot apply a buffer. I cannot deny a license unless it's under specific circumstances. So we've spoken at length with Al Prescott and some of the others about a retired chief by the name of Ron Glidden, who is a recognized Massachusetts firearms law expert. We ran that scenario by him as well, and it is well outside the scope of any police chief or licensing authority, firearms licensing authority, to apply any of those measures that they say that I can. I cannot create a buffer. I cannot deny a license just because I don't want to have a firearm business next to another firearm business. That is not within the scope of my authority. So if I do that, I am opening myself and the town up to additional liabilities, and I will get sued. It's not something I can do. It's about as clear as I can say it.
Yeah,
No,
no,
thank you.
cannot do
I
it.
just wanted that on the
Great
record.
idea, Bob. Yep, yep. Okay.
Hi, Joe Spadano, 5 Blaisdell Road. Just a couple questions. What is the data to support an increase in FFLs to an increase in crime?
I don't have those stats.
That seems important. How many gun dealers are currently in Westford? Like, not gun ranges, but like I could go buy a gun on FFL 6 or 7.
You know, I don't believe there's any.
Okay, so 0.
We do have a couple of FFLs, but they're relics, not for sale.
CNR, yeah. So if I buy my firearms in Woburn to then bring to Westford and store there, what would that prevent if we pass this law?
So I'm not sure how long you've been following along with this. So what we're looking to do here is separate not stop
Sure.
the gun shops,
Yep.
separate them by 500 feet.
I get it,
That's
yeah.
all we're looking to do, right?
Yeah.
You can buy a gun in Westford, you can own a gun in Westford under this bylaw.
Right.
We just don't want them congregating, as it happened in the mill,
Sure.
with a whole bunch of FFLs in one place.
And there was an increase in crime because there were a concentration of FFLs?
I can let the chief let you know what he knows about that.
We can refer to a bunch of documentation that the ATF had put out over the past year. There were several firearms dealers over there that lost their licenses because they weren't following the laws of the Commonwealth.
So they're already breaking the law?
Yes, several of them got charged over there, yes.
And this would prevent that?
It's going to prevent some of the frame game that they've been playing.
I mean,
with, yes.
I am a believer that the frame and receiver rule should be a state-addressed issue, not a town-addressed issue. And I understand why, you know, having that close proximity would maybe encourage that, but it's, you know, you're breaking the law when you break the law, and the state should take that up, not the town, is my opinion. But I
don't
do think it
necessarily
makes sense.
I don't
but
necessarily disagree with that. However, the state is not.
They're not, yes.
And
yeah.
they've encouraged the towns to enact their own,
Sure.
basically come up with their own rules.
But I
So we're
would
just trying
say
to
we
have
should pressure the state to do this, and I mean, I don't know who wouldn't support that, but yeah, that's all.
And to try to answer your first question, I would just say that in the very long series of hearings we had the first time around, I didn't hear any information that directly linked the presence of FFLs in town directly to an increase in crime. There
I
was
looked
some
briefly, I couldn't find
Yeah,
any
there
myself.
was some information brought up. There was an article that was pointed to. It looked specifically at sort of like inner cities, inner city areas, or like I think they called them like disenfranchised or like areas that had significant populations of residents that you probably don't find in Westford specifically from an economic standpoint, and that it could in those situations. But there was nothing that I saw reading a lot of material at that time that seemed to directly point to an increase based on.
I would say that, yeah, I'd assume that too, yeah. All right.
And that was a plethora of research materials that came from the Board of Health.
Yes.
And I think this board here rebutted a lot of that because of that point. It was for heavily urban areas. It was areas that just were not analogous to Westford. It's hard to take an example from, let's say, Los Angeles or downtown New York City and apply it to Westford. And we didn't. But we do share the chief's concerns about the close proximity of the FFLs. And we just want to try to minimize some of the bad effects that were observed in the Littleton Mill.
Sure. I understand that. I just, my big thing, and I think it's a state issue, and it's bigger than the town. I understand the frustration when the state is not doing anything, but I think we should pressure the state then if that's the case. And who would not support that?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Diane Wood, 122 Depot, one more time. Can you walk through the timing and the process and the steps
Well,
as we move forward?
Mr. Morissette, answer that question.
So this is the start of the public hearing. Presumably, the board will continue it for at least one more time. They usually do that to allow for added public comment. They usually also want to have benefit of putting together a draft report and recommendation. When they conclude the public hearing, the select board will schedule it for some town meeting. But given the fact that there's a public hearing notice out there and the public hearing has started, if new businesses were to come in prior to, if town meeting were to approve a bylaw, they would be on notice, so to speak, of this proposal that's in the works. And so if they did come in, they know then that they would be subject to potential zoning enforcement if they were somehow not in compliance with what is proposed here. That's assuming favorable town meeting action.
Is there a
Diane, you got to speak at the microphone so it's recorded.
It's a quick one, that's why. Is there a window? I'm looking for the timing. X number of days, by X number of days of the second public notice, we have to have a special town meeting. I'm trying to get a big picture here of what the timing could be.
So big picture here is that there are some windows of opportunity, and generally it's around 6 months from the public hearing is the latest that town meeting could act on that. So that's the outside window.
So October could be.
Yeah, we have a regular special town meeting in October that this could be a part of.
We would confirm that with council, of course.
Hi.
Good evening, Elisa Nakashin, Holsberg, 6 Betty Lane. Just a few questions. I know at one of the meetings you held on this, I asked if you'd consider Route 40, because that's the one part of town where we've actually had a business before successfully. Is there any reason why we might have chose to stay away from the industrial or commercial parts of Route 40?
So, there are a couple of reasons. One, at least, is if we're picking existing zoning districts, once you went along Route 40, that would bring you into the Industrial A zoning district that you're very familiar with. It would also bring you into some residential districts, even if you limit it to the Industrial A zoning districts. That would include a lot of parts of town in some of the village areas, which some people may say is fine, others it may have, it would be a very different part of town and more widespread At that time, there was also some friction about mixture of businesses and residential along the Route 40 corridor. Town meeting gave us a resolution to examine that, so factoring all that in, plus at that time, there were other buffers in play that would have really eliminated large sections of some of the industrial A areas. So again, we don't have that competition this time, except for the schools as of right now. But at that time, there were many other buffers that came into play that would have been problematic for adding another entire zoning district.
But is there still opportunity right by the Chelmsford to Greystone area?
The industrial A zoning district could. So
I
that's
just
a
want to throw that
possibility.
out again as a suggestion, because if we're really invested in having space where we can keep folks 500 feet apart, give them a few options, so one can be over there, somebody else can be over there. And again, I point out the fact that 2 areas up in that region supported a firearms business, one in the Vinyl Square area right over the Chelmsford line, and one in Westford, not too far from where I live, and there was never any issues, really. So I again ask if you'd consider revisiting the sensible areas where there's not so much residential concern there. I'm very interested in hearing what the chief had to say. Thank you for explaining all that, and thank you for Bob for asking him, because it's certainly it was my understanding that that law did provide some authority where you could do this without a special permit. My question is, then what does that law allow? Because the language is quite clear. It says you can do something. Have we figured out what you're able to do? And can we achieve what we're looking to achieve within the purview of that law? And the reason why I ask that is because I truly believe this special permit thing is going to be a non-starter for a lot of people.
So, under section 123, chapter 140, section 123, it really is just kind of the specifics for the dealer at the property. I have no control over that. There's no leeway. This is what he's required to report and everything else, and what we can go in and inspect. So like the logbooks and sales and everything else. So the 122, section 122 is the firearms dealer license.
Yep.
All I can consider on that is an alien, a minor, a person who's been adjudicated a youthful offender, so on and so forth, what is specifically written within that law. I cannot create a buffer, I cannot limit the number of licenses. So I can disqualify somebody if it's not even unsuitable, similar to like an LTC, a license to carry, where I can make a determination of unsuitability if they have an extensive domestic history or something along those lines, where for a police chief, for a domestic situation, if they have a domestic history, although they've never been convicted, we can actually bring that up with the judge if I deem somebody unsuitable. I do not even have that leeway under this.
But what you say is concerning to me, because wouldn't we want to start there first? Because what I'm hearing is it's more lenient for someone to run a business than it is for someone to have these in their home, right? And you can have many more of them in a location. So wouldn't we as a town want to explore bylaws that say the chief has the authority to say no to someone who's unsuitable in the same way that he can say to anybody who would carry?
I don't think that we would have that authority to be able to,
Really?
no.
That's not
'Cause then
within the
that gets
purview of the
into-
planning board or the town.
What you were saying about the state. We gotta push
No,
somewhere.
but, so if you actually, when you go into section 122, the specific guidelines for what I can consider for a firearms business, considering they're in the proper zoning, they've worked with the planning board, they've received every other go-ahead that they're supposed to. They have their FFL license, be able to come into Massachusetts and try and do this. I do not. So that's where it kind of limits the scope.
Yep.
Okay? Because LTC is a lot different.
Right.
Like, you don't go through the ATF for
Right,
LTC.
right. Okay. The question about the 3-year thing, I am concerned about that. I don't believe we can, what you're asking me what I'm talking about.
What 3-year?
Is it 2-year or 3-year?
2-year,
I'm sorry,
2-year.
2-year. I'm saying 3. It's 2-year. I don't know how you prevent us from lining ourselves up for another lawsuit if this gets amended on town meeting floor and drives us towards something that's too similar, right? And that's a gray area. What's similar? Costs money to go to court and figure out what's similar. And right now, I don't think taxpayers want to hear about spending more money for for that type of exercise. So I guess I'm still looking for what I've said before. Folks come to town for the good schools. They also come to town because there's not one gun club, but there's two. And the ethics, the values in this community, the culture is very deep rooted, going back decades. So I think this is going to be a non-starter. I would beg you to look for other ways that can come close to what the chief needs. If you can't do it exactly the way you want, maybe moving the needle further rather than going for broke here, because I think we're going to spend a lot of money. It's going to be a lot of risk. It's going to be all kinds of amendments. We know that. And that's probably going to put us in a situation where we're looking at lawsuits. I'm truly concerned about that. And y'all know I'm not a stranger to that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Jeff Pearson, 59 Monadnock Drive. Actually moved here about 6 years ago. I started this again about early last year when it was on the hands of the select board. For medical reasons, I had to step out for a while. But so a couple questions I want to ask. One question you didn't answer to Mr. Moran was, how much did that special meeting cost back in October? That's information that should be available.
I can't give you the cost of it. It was as part of the regular course of business for a special town meeting, so there was I wouldn't, except for maybe some additional costs by council.
Yep.
As far as police and clerks, there was no additional personnel brought in just for that specific issue.
I get it. This is a very divisive issue. And I actually made the mistake of stepping into it in my place of employment, which is over in Lowell. I had a coworker, I just mentioned the meeting in October to a coworker, and he almost literally started blubbering at me on the floor. Later I had to come and apologize to me for his behavior, but it's like, okay, back off. Also on the litigation side, and this is information I provided at one of the first select board meetings. Does anyone remember a case where Lowell and Springfield, maybe about 15, 20 years ago, decided to outlaw or prohibit panhandling in their respective cities? Okay. That got brought up eventually by a civil rights attorney and got passed on to another civil rights attorney, and he successfully sued both cities to overturn their ordinance or article. There were no penalties to the cities, but in the end, Lowell and Springfield were collectively on the hook for about $1.2 million in legal fees. All right, now that's again 15, 20 years ago, so let's tack a little bit.
So just so that was banning panhandling, not regulating panhandling.
Right, banning it outright.
Right,
Okay.
so it's not what we're looking to do at
Again,
all.
civil rights, it's a civil rights issue. They got a good civil rights lawyer. They got them overturned. And keep in mind, in people's, scope of things, panhandling is probably like way down here in terms of importance. Okay, this is a much more highly charged issue. So it's going to get noticed, and there are plenty of good Second Amendment attorneys out there. We take this ahead 15, 20 years now to the present. If somebody comes into town, wants to open up a firearm shop, and for whatever reason are told they can't, other than their suitability, and they get themselves an attorney, whether they win or lose the case, Westford could be on the hook for about $1 to $2 million potentially.
I don't know that you can compare that to a panhandling case from 15 years ago.
It's still a civil rights
So
case.
I would suggest to you that if they came to town and we said, no, we don't want your business, no, we don't want firearms, right? We would absolutely be on the hook for large civil penalties.
Where
right?
they're going
But we're
to
not-
get you is,
This reminds me, so you're bringing up something we now can research. We did not have this benefit back in the
Yep.
fall.
Okay.
There are several communities, I believe, that have now passed firearm bylaws in this area in response to Littleton. I believe it was brought up by Littleton, by Acton, and maybe by Maynard.
okay,
I'd like to see the results, Jeff, because that does now work against what happened with panhandling, where They sued and lost.
Well,
But this.
it's just a matter of time. It's
These new
ultimately a
firearm
matter of time.
bylaws have been through the Attorney General review, and we could have the benefit of that review now in
And
shaping this bylaw.
it's a matter of time. Eventually, somebody's gonna feel like their civil rights have been violated.
I agree with you. Somebody in Acton, if after there's 2 gun shops, if a third wants to come in and they're not allowed, they're absolutely gonna sue.
Just because they haven't been sued yet doesn't mean that it won't happen. So
But I think
the-
that's a big difference from limiting, just by limiting in distance.
So the other thing to consider is we are facing a financial crunch, okay? Changes at the state level, costs have been passed on down to towns. Number of towns are looking at Prop 2.5 overrides. And now you're looking at potentially restricting the businesses in town that are gonna be paying taxes. The optics of that is not necessarily gonna be great, okay? Yes, we get it. Businesses don't pay the lion's share of taxes. I've seen the town budget, I understand. But the optics are not going to be good for you. Okay, all right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I would want to say that I disagree with restricting. I would say we're regulating.
Hey, a lot of 52 Nutting Road. I just wanted to step back a little bit and just make sure I understood correctly. So we're taking these steps because of Littleton, where all the gun shops are right now is being closed down by the new owners, and the fear is that they're going to move out and try to do what they did in Littleton, which I don't think you want them to do, into some surrounding town. So we're not the only town that's doing this.
And I would suggest that not necessarily that they're going to come here, but that anybody could do it.
Okay.
Right? Not that they're all going to run for Littleton and come to Westford, but if the chief identified a problem, we're attempting to fix the problem.
And they could.
And I think it's also important to note, they have not been removed from that facility in Littleton yet. It's expected they will.
It got delayed a year.
When the new owner starts the renovation process. That has not started.
Okay, so I've been in some other meetings, and I think somebody said it got delayed a year. They gave them another year or something like that. And so we don't want them, or Chief, you don't want them to be able to go into one of these empty buildings and all of a sudden there's 20 firearm businesses and they're kind of doing the shenanigans that they were doing in Littleton. And part of the reason you're bringing this back out now quickly is because you feel there's a time crunch because of what's happening in Littleton. And as long as you start this process, then anybody that comes in that gets a license might need to abide by that. That kind of right?
Well, I think also you have to look at.
I'll let the chief answer. He's asked to put words in the chief's mouth. So the chief.
I don't know that there's any more exigence now than there was back in December of last year. It's a concern, and I think it's just been an ongoing process where I think we've had lots of conversation, and it makes more sense to continue the conversation and try to have some sort of agreement reached and put in a reasonable bylaw put forward now that either can be expanded or reworked or whatever if it's in place. The fear is that Littleton closes down and we have a business owner in town that is willing to accept 10, 15, 20 of those firearms businesses. Granted, most of them are just firearms enthusiasts that have their FFL because they like to have things that other people aren't allowed to. But there is a section of dealers over there that are continuing to skirt the rules in Massachusetts. And that's been my goal, and one of the things that I would like to see accomplished is to see if we can regulate that a little bit.
Thanks.
What I was going to remind people of and have the chief address was at the town meeting, the chief did try to make an amendment to the bylaw on the floor to be very similar, I think, to what we're discussing tonight, and withdrew that when it became apparent it was going to be too difficult to do that on the fly. So this was kind of addressing what was occurring at town meeting.
Correct. That was not fun.
Anybody else? I do think we should continue this to hold more public comment May 6th, Jeff?
Yes, sir.
Question
Sure.
before we extend to then.
Yeah.
Does it make sense, in light of the open forum comments around transparency and visibility, Jeff, does it make any sense to maybe continue to the second meeting in May? If we could put information in front of the public even earlier, or perhaps multiple times, to make sure that there's visibility and transparency to the process.
Thinking a draft decision?
No, I was just thinking if we continue to the second meeting in May, we could perhaps publicize that this is going to be on that docket multiple times between now and then, and give people plenty of advance notice in order to participate if they wish to in the discussion. Because we probably won't solve the hybrid meeting problem by then.
Do we want to do both? What would you prefer, Jeff?
Believe it or not, it's not about me.
Well, I don't, you know the calendar, what's on the dockets for those two meetings, or what's going to
Well,
be?
the planning board doesn't say what town meeting this goes on to, if it's a special or if it's the October.
Right.
I think the May 6th will give us enough time to do some of that requested research, and it keeps all the options open, and there's no harm in continuing it again.
We could do that too.
Okay. Also, before that meeting, Jeff, if, just as some open comment, maybe look at some possibility of a area on Route 40 to just contemplate at the next meeting?
Sure. What we could do is we could take a look at the industrial A zoning district, take a look at, because now that we're outside the CH&IH, we gotta take a look at what other buffers would come into
Right.
play for schools, see what that leaves, and we can put that on the table for that meeting.
Terrific. Before we continue, anybody else have any comments, thoughts?
Member of the audience has stepped back to the mic.
Yeah, I just had one question. Bill Water, 52 Nutting Road. If people send you emails, do those get published like with their opinion either way, do those get published anywhere?
Yeah, Jeff?
All right, so if we receive email correspondence in time to include in the packet, we include it as part of correspondence in the packet, as part of this agenda item. If we do not get it in time, which, by the way, the packets usually go out the Thursday before town meeting, sometimes Friday, but if we get a lot of, for planning board, if we get a lot of late arriving correspondence, it is difficult and challenging to get everything included in the packet. But if you can try to get email correspondence in, say, the Wednesday or Thursday before the next planning board meeting, we will include it in the planning board packet.
And when you say the packet, do you mean?
So there's an electronic packet that is available for viewing online. Just like you go and you find agendas and you can find minutes, you can also find planning board packets. So all the information that the board has in their packet is readily available, usually online the Friday before.
Thank you.
Yep.
One thing, Mike.
Yep.
Yeah, just based on some good comments tonight, staff and chief, do you guys know if there's anything at the state level that's happening in looking at this issue in terms of, obviously, people had to take notice of what happened in Littleton. Is there anything happening at the state level to address that?
There is still a firearms bill being contemplated. It was in committee the last time I had heard. It had changed from the HB, what was it, 4420? Yeah, it has changed dramatically from that to address a lot of the concerns of both Second Amendment concerns as well as Mass Chiefs. So there is a lot more support for the current bill that is going. I just don't know if it is going to make it out for an actual assembly vote.
The Senate passed it.
Okay, so it's on Congress.
And that's at the state level?
I'll provide this to Jeff and Joe so it can be in the next packet. I did find at Acton just now, the Attorney General's review back on 20 November 2023 favorably approving Acton's firearm zoning bylaw. And it also states in there that part of this was based upon their recent favorable reviews approving Littleton in 2023, Plainville, Wellesley, Brookline in 2022, and prior to that, Westwood and Dedham the previous 2 years. So there was some prior case law that they were working with what they had reviewed. So that's something we could also do before the next meeting, maybe take a look at the general breadth of what Acton did. It sounds to me like it's pretty similar, but I haven't looked at it yet.
So we're happy to gather some of that information, put it in the packet. I do agree on a couple points with some of the comments that were heard tonight, as well as what the board has said. You know, each bylaw may be different. Some of them are proposing a limitation on the total number. I think that's very different than, you know, what the board is proposing this time around. And someone raised a very valid point. Just because something is approved doesn't mean it isn't subject to challenge. And even if you prevail, it doesn't mean there isn't cost. So I think there's valid points all around, but we're happy to gather that information and make it available in your next packet.
Unless there's anything else.
Anything else, Chief?
No, sir. Thank you.
Move that we continue PB 2404 to the May 6th meeting at 7 p.m. here in Meeting Room 201 Town Hall.
Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Kind of sad. Well, it's no fun if I did it while you were gone.
Okay, moving right along. General business item, discussion and consideration of possible action regarding MBTA Communities Bylaw Annual Town Meeting. Mr. Morissette.
Yes, sir. So, a couple of things. As you may recall, and it's in the packet, which is available online, we did receive some comments back from the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. They're important because while the Attorney General's Office reviews zoning bylaw amendments for legality, the EOHLC reviews the zoning bylaw amendments relative to the state's mandate for multifamily housing for MBTA communities. They're the ones that decide if a bylaw complies with the state's mandate. So we have two different levels of review, and they did provide comments back right before town meeting. We got written comments Friday before the Saturday town meeting. So that did not leave us time to post a meeting and change, you know, the handouts for town meeting. So this board was prepared to make an amendment on town meeting floor. And for those watching at home, the comments in all the 46 pages of our draft zoning bylaw, the only comments really from the EOHLC was to remove the word gross in front of density, to remove the term gross density in one other place, and we then also removed the definition of gross density. So those are the extent of the changes. What council has advised, since this board already took a vote at town meeting during an all boards meeting, we can simply update the handout for town meeting to make those three small, I would say not very substantive changes, without the need to make further amendments on town meeting floor for that. So the other thing is now with a different date, you had a planning board member who was prepared to deliver the planning board's report and recommendation, Joni Croto, who is also going to speak on behalf of the Affordable Housing Trust Committee. She has a conflict, and so she will not be available should town meeting take place on April 27th. So we are looking for someone else to step up who could be a logical replacement. I don't know if there's anyone who, I don't know, might have also been on the McMack Advisory Committee and works well with NIMCOG. I don't know. But we need someone else who's willing to deliver the planning board report and recommendation.
Well, if it was May 5th, I would be available to do it.
Okay.
April 27th doesn't work.
April 27th. What if you didn't have to speak? Would you be able to go to town meeting? Okay. Just checking. So
We could do a hybrid with Joni.
There you go.
It's too soon, Mike. So we're looking for someone else who would be willing.
I'm not sure I'm here.
Nothing like flies.
That's a bad, I mean, kind of worked around a schedule and.
I understand. You planned for the known schedule.
I'm not sure at this point. I'll know this week.
So
We can figure it out.
this gets interesting, though, is because if we don't have a quorum of planning board members present, then you're not going to be able to take a position on any amendments.
Right.
Yeah.
For our amendments, so that's interesting. That's great. It's just adds to the pile of fun. So if you two, and maybe you, can figure out your availability, we would like to at least,
Know that, yeah, I understand.
prepare for that somehow. That's That's great. Joe, what else?
I think that's about it.
So because you have, it looks like you're willing to forego an April 16th meeting, which would have been a Tuesday anyhow, which is an off night for you. We're going to try to take that opportunity for anyone who has other comments. There's been a lot of late arrival. It's typical with town meeting. We get a lot of comments. So we're going to reach out to some folks and just have sort of a extended office hours, a little discussion that night for people who want to, you know, this is another chance to learn more about MBTA. What does it really mean? Because there is some misinformation out there. So we're going to take that. So if people want to take advantage of that, we'll get a flyer out for that night. And if people can't make that night, April 16th, then we'll try to set something up, make some office hours available during the day, or just try to schedule some phone conversations. So
I should be around for that.
that'd be great.
And Jeff, I will be here April 16th, so I'd be glad to
Excellent.
help out. As I think I let you know, I mean, I am very concerned about some of the misinformation I'm seeing out there.
What's the
On
misinformation, Joni?
On Facebook, you know, belonging to like Westford Friends.
Yeah.
People are posting things that are like totally incorrect.
Oh, really?
Incorrect, like, you know, we're gonna build 4,800 units and we are going to drive out businesses and their tax, I mean, it's bad. So I am very concerned about it.
Can we post the recording from the Cameron Senior Center to Facebook? To that crowd?
You can link it.
Yeah.
If you have it on WestfordCAT or something, we can comment.
It's one of the issues with that, which there was a lot of great questions and feedback, is it only covered the presentation point and some of the most valuable parts of that conversation. They didn't record that because people were asking from the audience, they couldn't pick up on it, so I don't know what they do or don't have, because there was a lot of great questions along those lines.
Yeah, they tore down after it broke to the
Yeah.
audience asking questions, but at least the two of yours
Yeah, 'cause
presentation was up there.
They were very
They were
candid,
fast.
and, yeah, they were great. Like, you don't have to wonder what their concerns are, they just, bam. So, but there was a lot of good information shared, so.
I guess the one maybe comment also from town meeting, given the large number of attendees and given the fact that there just is no way to print out 1,600, and let's say we project to be 2,000 attendees at the next rendition of this meeting, I think it would be really useful if somewhere right on the front of the Westford homepage, you could have a link to all of the handouts in one place, and encourage people to please download them for themselves and take the burden off printing out those copies, because, you know, as we saw, those handouts were quickly depleted at town meeting.
Yeah, we had,
Materials are up on the town moderator's page.
yeah, all the town meeting stuff is, but we had two types of handouts. We had sort of the
Explainers.
explainers and the gist.
Understand, I think if it could be all in one place and the link was on the front page, you know, or the link goes to the moderator's page, but I think very few people knew to go and find those. And with such a large town meeting coming up, it would behoove us to get that information to them as easily as possible. And make sure we advertise that too. You know, we all got the notice last week. I'm hoping there'll be another one. And just tell people, please, go to the town webpage and follow the link to get all of the information and materials.
So I do think they're sending another postcard, I think, because it's another town meeting, you know, maybe we can see if that can be
Just
put in that card, maybe?
Maybe they can put a QR code or something you could scan.
Even on the front page of the website, it says news and announcements. It always, why, I would put the video up there.
the video and all the informational links, everything.
Just have that there from now until the town meeting. As one of those recurring announcements. It'll get a lot of views, I would think.
All right, we will make that request.
And one other suggestion, maybe silly, but the, you know, triangular sign that you put in the center, they put in the center of town, a 10-town meeting, could we put something a few weeks ahead, you know, check the website for information on MBTA communities, you know, or use that electronic, you know, the electronic sign that was advertising town meeting.
Even just, it's just all informational materials for all bylaws.
Yeah. I think it would just, I mean.
Same thing goes with the override.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Please.
Jeff, if we, at town meeting, we're going in with one proposal for the MBTA communities, but are we going to be prepared to offer an amended proposal?
So at this point, neither the advisory committee nor the planning board has provided direction to provide a plan B.
Right. But the article could be amended through the town meeting process on the floor.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I have a question. So there's a comment in the official note from the ELOC that says there's dimensional controls, including the impact of maximum block length in the general development standards, as well as a district transitional buffer that impose limits not captured by the compliance model. Since the submitted materials were comfortably above the minimum requirements, ELOC believes these controls would not jeopardize the satisfying of the minimum requirements if they were accounted for. If the district geography is reduced at town meeting, the changes would first affect the gross density calculation, and if it is scaled back significantly, ELOC would need to revisit some numerical inputs like the general development standards. So how does that play out if at town meeting the number of parcels that are in the overlay district are proposed to be reduced, getting us closer to the minimum requirement? That would potentially necessitate a change to the dimensional standards, right?
Correct.
So how does that,
Potentially.
so then how does town meeting take a vote on that if the
Well, that's
bylaw is gonna need to inherently be changed anyway?
so what the state has said, and you've seen the same correspondence, and we were on a call and they gave that other email, is right now, you've got enough of a safety factor that we're not concerned.
Right.
But say you get closer, it could be a real problem. It could be a compliance issue.
Right.
So do we know where that line is? No, we don't know what's safe or not. Neither does EOHLC right now. They don't know when it's a problem. All they're saying is right now, it's not a problem. And I'm sure there's plenty of room in between, but we don't know. So some of the things that would make these projects better, more livable, friendlier for pedestrians, the green space, the setbacks, all those things that are good, they can cut down on the potential unit count. In addition to if the soils aren't good enough, all those things that we do know about.
Sure.
But the compliance model is not perfect, and they've already acknowledged, particularly for a community like Westford, the stupid math provides an unrealistically high number that is simply not feasible for Westford. And it's made less likely because of the things that are put in to make it a better place can also cut down on the practical development. So between their math and, you know, on one hand, they're saying, hey, there's some really good stuff in here, but by the way, that can hurt your unit capacity. But you're over your unit capacity, so we're not having a problem with it now. We can't tell you, and they can't tell you right now, when does it start to become a problem?
That's why we've been trying to hammer home, like, don't get so hung up on the number the compliance model is spitting out for our proposed area, because yes, it's important for actual compliance, but it's not a realistic build-out number based on the dimensional standards that we have.
Right.
Because it doesn't factor in a lot of, there's a lot of things that we have, and it doesn't truly factor in some of like some of the setbacks that we have.
The varying setbacks.
Yeah, it's, but what matters for compliance is the unit count, no matter how unrealistic. So it is a challenge, and it's, you know, could be a problem.
I think we had discussions about this, knowing that if there was an issue with the spring town meeting, we still have the fall town meeting.
Yes.
To be able to go back to ELOC and, but we don't wanna do that, obviously.
Well, yeah, because then you would potentially have, let's say that the overlay district got reduced, and it passed at a more minimum standard, but then you find out that you actually have to amend the bylaw, you're coming back in front of town meeting to amend what you already passed. That sounds like fun.
And but just from the comments I've read and seen, I don't know that there's, the people who are concerned about this aren't breaking out parts of the district. You know, it's been the district itself is the problem, not necessarily the acre that's next to my house or, you know.
Yep.
that answered it.
Moving on, we have the review of draft minutes, March 4th and March 23rd. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes for March 4th.
Second.
All right, discussion? No, I haven't read them, I'm good with them. All right, for the minutes of March 4th, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes from March 23rd, 2004, can I get a motion to approve those minutes, please?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. That's a big one. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain. I wasn't there.
Oh, very good. Correspondence reports, updates, I did not see anything. Joe, Jeff, anything you want to add?
Sir.
Okay, anybody else?
I guess a question, Jeff, I mean, would it make sense to reach out to, like Representative Arcero to see if he can give us an update on where that state firearms law, the status is on that? Knowing our concerns and the chief's concerns.
Yep, we're happy to reach out.
All right.
It's similarly with the accessory dwelling unit bylaw.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I'd like to understand what the status of that is.
Yeah.
I did bring that up with NEMCOG, the conversation. I think they're gonna probably plan to roll out something to the region anyway. Come by each of the communities to give a broader update.
Yep.
So we did plant that seed.
It'd be nice, I'd just like to understand where it stands in the state.
Yep.
One question is, what opportunities do we have, for example, as a community, be it the planning board, the select board, to send letters regarding our position on different aspects of these laws being drafted?
All right, with that, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye.